Now recognizes Mrs. Tlaib.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I really do appreciate this hearing. This is a very, very important issue for my district, which is the third poorest congressional district in the country. And I really do appreciate your leadership on this and for this to be one of your first ever committee hearings on House Oversight. I do want to just clarify something that some of the members on the other side of the aisle have been pointing to. A recent study on long-term effects of California's paid leave program found that first-time mothers who used the policy had lower employment and wages 10 years later. Ms. Shaba, I would like to ask you about this specific study because I don't want people to mislead the public in regards to this, especially because, you know, I look at studies, polling, everything, and sometimes it doesn't match up with what's actually happening on the ground. So were there any limitations to the scope of this study that you could shed some light to so that we can have the facts before us and not make any misleading comments?
Yes, absolutely. So this study is interesting. It is an outlier. Many studies in California using different methodology have shown an increase in both labor force attachment and earnings over time. I think what's interesting and limiting about this study is that it studied the very first cohort of women who took leave, who had the additional 6 weeks of leave available in 2004, the third quarter of 2004 specifically, and followed the earnings of that cohort over a 5-year period and then a 10-year period. Now, there might be something unique or special about that first cohort of women. There also might be different effects. So when the California law first went into effect, the men's share of leave taking was less than 15%. So of all the baby bonding claims that were taken, men only took 15% of those. Now we're above close to 40%. So there's trends in gender equity that have changed. So we don't know how that study would bear out if it was repeated, you know, on data.
And Ms. Shaba, in fact, there have been other studies conducted of California mothers that show that paid leave had a positive impact on the workforce. Isn't that correct?
Yes, absolutely, and a particularly substantial effect on Latina women and low-wage women. So it is not right to focus everything on this one particular study. The other thing that this study really shows is that we need to think about how we make policies accessible for men, how we encourage men's leave taking, how we pair childcare, better access to quality, affordable childcare for parents, and how we think about part-time parity and the wages and benefits and opportunities for people who do choose to work less than full-time. The other limitation of the study is that it didn't include self-employment income, and yet one of the author's hypotheses was that some of these women moved into gig work and into less formal employment relationships so that they could spend more time, but we don't know the effects of those wages or that income on their outcomes.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. One of the things I know is really critically important is try to bring people in this room that are not here physically. And many residents in my district can't afford to come here or to speak up because they're working right now. And one community of caregivers who are often left out of the paid family leave conversation are families who have members with disabilities and special care needs. And I want to shed light to the unique experiences for many of those parents. I want to share a story of one of my residents. She's the mother of 3. And one of her boys, Isaiah, was born with liver disorder. After receiving a liver transplant, his mother started working as a server to help provide for her family, and she was very upfront with her employer about having a child with special needs. One particular day after this employer refused to let her leave early to take care of her son, she was forced to prioritize health for her son and left her shift early, which resulted in her getting fired. As it stands, her son, Isaiah, takes 8 medications daily and goes to the hospital at least once a week to check his liver blood levels. If the U.S. had an exclusive paid leave policy, not only would it keep my resident, this mother, to still have a job, but she would have been able to confidently work without her livelihood being threatened on a regular basis. Ms. Shaba, can you elaborate on unique difficulties that families with special needs children have? But also, and this is something that I really think our country needs to look at, to me this is a form of discrimination. Yes, that mother may not be the one with disability, but that fact of the matter is that the discrimination towards her, which is because of the loved one and because of the fact that she's a caretaker, I feel like it needs to extend in protecting those caregivers. That this is, again, a form of discrimination. And we know, and Chairwoman, I consistently was always asked as a young person applying for jobs whether or not I was going to have children, which was illegal. We made it legal, right?
Yes.
But I do think, you know, people are going to push forward and say, well, you have a child with special needs, I'm not going to hire you. So if you can talk a little bit about that, I really would appreciate it.
That's right. There's a couple of really good studies out there about the multiple impacts that affect parents and other caregivers to special needs children and other people with disabilities, the relationship between the income in those households, the expenses of those households, and lack of access to leave. I think the other thing that just strikes me as we think about policies that would exclude those families, you know, we hear a lot about one-size-fits-all policies, but I think the ultimate one-size-fits-all policy would actually be a policy that only applies to new parents and not to all of the people who need leave for their own serious health condition or to care for a family member. To say that caregiving is less beneficial or less worthy of investment just strikes me as the ultimate discrimination, as you say.
Okay, thank you. Congresswoman Presley is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this